As I said, my name is Pim van der Malen. I'm a water and food security specialist at the embassy in Nairobi, Embassy of the Netherlands. I'll be guiding you through today's session. And the program, as I said, is around lessons from programs related to WASH and IWRM on collaboration, and more particularly on communities of practice. The program consists of several parts. We're now in the introductory part, where we will also, of course, apart from introducing the panelists, which I'll do shortly, we'll also introduce the programs we'll be talking about. And then we go into a panel discussion on communities of practice, how they are used, what the added value of them is in relation to the effectiveness and relevance of the programs they're a part of. And then we'll have an opportunity after questions and answers with the panel also to check out the questions you have. And for that, we'll be drawing from what you put in the Pathable app. Now, first of all, let's shift to one of my colleagues, actually, of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands in The Hague, to tell us a little bit more about the three programs which will be discussed today. Over to you, Bre.
Thank you very much, Pim. My name is Bretje Paardenkoper. I'm working just like Pim for DGIS. And yes, thank you very much for the first slide. I'm going to introduce to you the three programs or the three partnerships that are organizing this session. And can I have the next slide, please? The first one of that is Waterworks. Now, Waterworks is a partnership of water utilities. It aims to increase sustainable access to water and/or sanitation facilities to 10 million people. They do that by strengthening the financial, technical, and social sustainability of the partner water companies. And they have 40 water partner operators in Africa and Asia, so that's really something. They are also doing this by strengthening the enabling environment of laws and regulations, financing, and policy, so what we call the system. And finally, last but not least, definitely not least, increasing access to water infrastructure investment finance, because that's very much necessary, as we have been seeing in other sessions this week. That's for Waterworks. Can I have the next slide, please? And the second one is a Blue Deal, a partnership that's organized by the Dutch water authorities or Dutch water boards. They aim to help 20 million people around the world gain access to clean, sufficient, and safe water. And the partnership, it's a peer-to-peer capacity building program between the Dutch water authorities and regional water authorities in the countries where Blue Deal operates. And they operate in 14 countries, and they have their 16 peer-to-peer partnerships. How do they do that? By strengthening the three crucial elements of good water management. First of all, sufficient knowledge and expertise. Second, a well-functioning organization. And thirdly, cooperation with key stakeholders, again, what we would call it's a long-term partnership since in 2030. Next slide, please. Then the third one, last but not least, the Netherlands WASH Sdg Construction. They aim at getting 450,000 people clean drinking water, 2 million people safe sanitation, and 1.6 million people hygienic behavior. And they do it through three pathways in the program: improved behavior change interventions that could then lead to increased demand for improved WASH facilities and practices, improved WASH service provision that leads in turn to increased availability and affordability of WASH products and services, and strengthened WASH governance and institutional framework. Again, strengthening the system that leads to governments enabling efficient and effective delivery of inclusive and sustainable WASH services. Next one, please. Now, the synergies between those three programs are, of course, that they are long-term partnerships, that they have a peer-to-peer partnership approach to knowledge, and of course, sustainability as an overall objective, focus also on climate, gender and inclusion, and reaching the most poor and vulnerable. And finally, also have communities of practice. And that's what we are going to talk about today. So thank you very much, and back to you, Pim.
Thanks, Brecht. Yes, I'm back. Thanks, Brecht, for introducing those 3 programs. Great to hear. Those programs are also close to my heart, as I worked on quite a few of them when I was still based in The Hague. We gradually move to the panel discussion part of today's program. And before we start, of course, I would like to introduce the panelists to you. We have 3 dynamic duos lined up for you, each duo representing one of the programs, and I'll briefly introduce the panelists to you all. For the mentioned Waterworks program, we have Emma Leicester. She's been a WASH expert for a long time. I know her also quite well, and she's been very much focusing in on WASH services for the urban poor. She's currently coordinating a charity foundation called Water for Life, and she's also a community of practice coordinator in the Waterworks program for low-income customer setup. Then all the way from Kenya, almost next door from me, Karibu Zaituni, good to see you again.
Thank you.
Zaituni has been a technical expert with the Waterworks program for quite a while, working from Nakuru County, where she supports 3 water utilities, 2 urban and 1 rural one, to implement pro-poor strategies with the aim, of course, to achieve SDG 6. Now, the duo for the Blue Deal, we have the co-coordinator Monique Swiers. She is a senior advisor for WASH and IWRM, working for the Blue Deal program. And she's a coach for the Blue Deal partnership, supporting the teams to provide knowledge exchange, collaboration in water resources management. And I hope, yeah, we have Luz also there, saved by the bell, and good to see you, Luz. Luz is what we call a young expert, a young talented colleague of ours stationed in Accra, also working on the Blue Deal program in Ghana. And the main thrust of her work is to facilitate stakeholders in establishing a river basin board and support them in writing integrated water resources management plans for the lower Volta basin. Over to the duo for the WASH Sdg Consortium. We have Sharon Rose. Sharon has been a WASH advisor for SNV based in the Netherlands. And for the WASH Sdg Consortium, she is part of the technical committee on behalf of SNV, one of the implementing partners. She's had a long experience in the WASH sector, and she's been part of the development of the gender equity and social inclusion and learning and knowledge development component of the stated program. And then the last panelist is Silvia Divina. She's a public health expert, and since 2016, she's working in water, sanitation and hygiene and early childhood development for Plan in Indonesia. And for the WASH Sdg Consortium, Silvia is involved in the sub-program of Plan International in Indonesia, focusing on gender transformative water sanitation and hygiene. Good to see you, Silvia, as well.
Thank you.
Those are the panelists. Then on communities of practice, we've asked you also ahead of the program, perhaps to reflect a little bit on what communities of practice really are. Well, you can think a lot of things about communities of practice. I like to think they're platforms for knowledge sharing, and they can take many, many different shapes and forms, as we will see also in the panel discussion. They can be virtual, they can be in person, although of course the COVID pandemic does not allow that to happen very often. They can be, let's say, self-managed or professionally moderated. So there are different formats in which you can implement these communities of practice. But what is the thrust, or the most important thing of it, of course, is that they're aimed to facilitate learning, knowledge exchange. In the case of these 3 programs, knowledge exchange between the implementing partners of the program, but also sometimes wider than that, involving, let's say, the wider circle of stakeholders. In the case of our programs, we talk about Dutch and Kenyan water sanitation service providers, for example, or government partners and CSOs and community stakeholders in a different case. What is important, I think, in terms when we talk about learning and knowledge exchange, it's really at the heart of sustainability. Knowledge exchange is really helping for programs to improve their efficiency and effectiveness by drawing up lessons, sharing experiences, and by doing so, become more effective, and ultimately through knowledge exchange also make sure that the knowledge necessary to sustain the interventions is actually landing where it should be, and that's where the projects are being implemented. So those are some thoughts about how you could define a little bit communities of practice. But now let's listen to the ones who have been hands-on involved in these communities of practice and start the panel discussions. And I have the opportunity and the pleasure of kicking off. And I'll start with a question to Sharon, working on the WASH Sdg program. Can you say something about the way you and your partners have organized your communities of practice, and who are participating? Is it just the implementing partners, or is there a wider group of people involved? And also perhaps 1 or 2 highlights of some of the events you have organized over the last couple of years. Over to you, Sharon.
Thanks, Pim. Yeah, so our WASH Sdg community of practice is a peer-to-peer learning community where we share experiences and knowledge, specifically in our case for this community of practice on gender and social inclusion. This because Leave No One Behind is at the center of our program. And the community of practice is helping us build our capacity and knowledge around gender and social inclusion issues. And it helps us identifying methods for improving our WASH programming. And this is hopefully done in a safe and constructive environment. So the way it is set up is the community of practice is facilitated by 2 external WASH-focused consultants who support our general GESI learning, knowledge and development work package of the WASH Sdg program. So first one focuses specifically on learning knowledge development, and her name is Tracy Keatman. And then we have Sue Cavill on board, who is a gender and social inclusion expert. Then as a program, from the start, we identified an overarching gender and social inclusion learning question, which was to what extent have the approaches to include the excluded in WASH decision-making been effective? So everything leads back, everything we do under the community of practice leads back to that in some way. And from the start, we have all agreed on tools. So all participants, so we have, for example, a WhatsApp group that is more informal and for ad hoc sharing. We have a MailChimp mailing list. Then we have monthly or mostly bi-monthly thematic learning webinars. And then we run twice yearly a 3-week thematic discussion on some of the more trickier issues. So for example, we had discussions on sanitation workers, on people living with disabilities, on strategic programming based on wealth quintile data, female entrepreneurs, yeah, name it. Then our community of practice has over 100 people from the 7 countries that we are implementing our program in, which are from Bangladesh, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Nepal, Tanzania, Uganda, and Zambia. And this includes the staff of the consortium members and also their implementing partners. Then we've also invited to cross the bridge to our Blue Deal and Waterworks programs. We invited participants from those 2 programs, as well as we have invited external experts on specific topics to join our discussions. Here, we've invited people from UNICEF GMP on wealth quintile data, from WaterAid, on sanitation workers, from London School of Hygiene on people living with disability and and elderly or aging, and from the Sanitation Learning Hub on other issues. So yeah, that's it. I think that's our community of practice in a nutshell, which brings me to actually asking the same type of question to Emma of the Waterworks program. So could you tell us a bit about your community of practice?
Yes, of course. Thank you. Yes, as Pim also said, I'm the COP coordinator on low-income customers. Almost all water utilities have someone in charge responsible for coordinating the activities within the utility in serving low-income customers. As for example, Sartuni is also part of the panel's discussions for Navasco. These are the members of the COPs. We've started our COP with a meeting in Nairobi. I think it's 3 years ago now or 4. All different coordinators from the different utilities came, and each of us presented what we are working on, our challenges, and most important, we got to know each other. Afterwards, we've also set up a WhatsApp group that is still active and where people can inform each other about what they are doing or request for support, as Sharon also said she has for her COP. We organize webinars, for example, about how to set up house-to-house surveys or on proposal writing, or the members share experiences they have with projects implementing and things like that, which is actually mostly on demand of the members itself. Last year, we also started to have a newsletter, and in this newsletter, all members are able to share their events, lessons, questions, and everything shared by the members itself. Monique, how does it work for the Blue Deal?
Yeah, thank you, Emma. Yes, what Sharon, how Sharon started, you all noticed that it's quite broad already in her program, and also I think that counts for Waterworks, how broad and with local partners you set up your community of practice. For us, we started beginning of this year with the goal to get more cross-learning between our Dutch water authorities, which are in our country teams of the Blue Deal. So we started small to get really a vibrant discussion on topics that we all work on. So all our 16 partnerships in Latin America, Asia, and Africa are dealing with. That is water allocation, wastewater treatment, monitoring cycle, and the overall subject stakeholder participation, which Loes is active in. So, and by that, using teams to get these teams as a group formed in as a knowledge team, and we organize intervision sessions regularly on these 4 topics, in which the Dutch experts could exchange knowledge and really get a cross-learning between the country teams. So that's our goal for now, for our community of practice, how we are organized. And we want to broaden our scope. So the next period, next phase of the Blue Deal, we also want to include our local partners in these discussions, and specifically on these 4 teams for the subject, but maybe also broader than that, because the Blue Deal program is quite broad when you're looking towards IWRM. We are helping of supporting the local water authorities with their whole water management. So that also includes several kind of topics on dealing with water, on safe, sufficient, and clean. So that's how we are organized. Thank you. Pim, I give you the floor. Pim? I think Pim has a problem with his sound and...
Oh, in case you have some difficult... Ah, there he is.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry about that. Apologies. We just had a blackout and the generator is popping on.
Oh.
This is the reality, which I'm sure when we organize communities of practice and webinars, you'll be facing as well. At the same time, I think being electronically connected to each other is also a big benefit during these times of COVID. So that's maybe something also to think about. Thank you for this first round of input. I thought very interesting picture about the different COPs. Obviously very differently organized. What I liked also to hear, I think it was Shani who said it's providing also a safe, constructive environment. And I think when it comes to cross-cultural learning and information sharing, having a safe environment, also to talk about maybe the more difficult things is very important. So let's move on to the second round of questions. We heard about how they're set up, who's participating, and what is actually happening in terms of events. But now let's hear from Silvia. So how relevant, or what is the relevance of your community of practice to you and your program? Over to you, Silvia.
Okay, thank you, Pim. I think the community of practice for Plan Indonesia is very important. We've been a part of the community of practice, especially for GESI, gender equality and social inclusion, since the beginning of the project in Indonesia. And it has been a very useful tool in terms of for us to network between each other, between all the WASH SDG implementers. It has also become a community of practice in terms of sharing lessons learned that we learn from each other. And then we be able to get the first hand of practical experience, practical also sharing and knowledge. And I think that's the key in terms of implementers such as us, because we need a practical guidance, a practical know how to, and then how we can learn from each other. It's different from when you join other types of networking. But for this one, I think it's very useful, especially at Plan Indonesia, because we also manage other funds, for example, from the Australia government. It has also become very useful for us in terms of internally with Plan, as well as externally between other partners for WASH SDG. So I think it's very useful, not only for networking, but also for sharing from each other. And my question to Zaitouni, what about from your example? What is the added value of joining COP, and what do you think are the benefits of joining COP in your organization? Over to you, Zaitouni.
Yeah, thank you. This is Zaitouni from Kenya. And for our end, actually, the idea of having COP as part of this program has been very helpful, because specifically for Kenya, like many utilities had no idea what the idea of PROPUA that is. Through the COP, where quite a number of utilities are now part of the platform, there's a lot of exchange, sharing of knowledge, not only within Kenya, but also other utilities under the Waterworks project. So that has really been very helpful, just getting to understand what is the approach, how are other people, other countries undertaking their perception initiative towards PROPUA and all that. That has really been very helpful to us. And through that, we have seen our utilities grow in relation to service provision in the low income areas. There's actually a significant growth because through the platform, we are sharing a lot. We get to know who is doing what is the approach, what are the challenges when it comes to serving the low income communities and all that. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, so that is it from my end. And personally for the project that I am working with, through, like when we started, we had the overall, we had all the utilities, and now specifically, now that I am coordinating the 3 utilities with the same county, this is also giving me a lot of knowledge on getting to understand. For example, the 3 utilities have different approaches and different dynamics. We have the rural and the urban. So through the COP program, we get to understand a lot what other countries, for example, what Ghana is doing, what is the approach they are trying to demonstrate, what Bangladesh is doing and all that. So this has really been a plus to us as the waterworks COPs. Yes.
Maybe Luz can.
Thank you, Zaitouni. I think also over to Luz now, and also asking you the question. Go ahead, Zaitouni.
Yeah, exactly. Just to get to understand from Luz now, how could COPs best support your work also? Just getting to understand from your end.
Yes. So hello, everybody. This is Luz from Ghana. I have to say, in Ghana, we have also COPs initiated by Ghanaians themselves. It's quite a multidisciplinary group in which we work on the water allocation plan. But COP is mostly helping me to learn more about methods on how to interact and learn with each other. So I will give you an example that I learned from our colleagues in Colombia, that they put a map of the water geographical area of the water where the water management plan needs to be developed, and then you talk about it together. Because what we noticed is that usually during our stakeholder meetings with Ghanaian institutions and our Dutch colleagues we talk mostly about responsibilities. So who should do what, and we have some finger pointing sometimes, and looking at an area together and just talking about what is there and how the water is managed through, let's say, a map. It is something very basic, but it's a very good method, and it has helped us a lot. So these are really things I learned from colleagues on the ground, and also from the Netherlands and other countries, to also implement in how we work together, basically. So that is, I think, one benefit. I think I should go to you, Pim, right?
Yes, fine. So this was another great round, I think. Starting with Luz, with a methodological, let's say, lesson from another country being applied then across the ocean in Ghana, and a method which turned out to be effective, and also diffusing a little bit some of the tensions which might arise if you talk water resources management with all the stakeholders there. And then also Zaitouni with her example, really, yeah, being an example to others within the program and even outside the program. That is quite encouraging to hear as well. So that's great. We also heard earlier on in the first round of discussions that community of practice are organized often around different themes or topics, like social inclusion or pro services, which is more or less the same. But how do you arrive at, let's say, identifying these topics? So in other words, how do you ensure that your community of practice is demand driven? Are those topics coming from discussions you have? Are they coming from discussions at headquarters where the projects are managed, or are they really coming from the people we work with in the countries? So Emma, can you shed some light on that to begin? Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Well, I must say it's sometimes difficult to find out what's going on in the different countries or what the demand is. And within the COP, that's also why we try to facilitate in sharing what the different coordinators are doing via the newsletter or WhatsApp, but also to make sure that they can find each other and know what's going on in each country, and also know what they can ask from each other. For example, all the community of practices know that Ghana is already quite far in developing a pro-poor unit or low-income customer unit within their utilities. So the other utilities are also able to ask. Or for example, in Kenya, they're really working on sanitation, and the other utilities know. So in that way, they're able to also ask the question and make sure we can organize the right sessions for them. But maybe Saituni, you can also explain how you experienced this as member of the VOP.
Saituni has a bad internet connection. So unfortunately, I don't think she's here right now.
Maybe Silvia can answer them.
Hello, yes. In terms of demand, this is quite a challenge actually within our own COP. We've been active for the gender equality and social inclusion. For example, during COVID times, it's quite challenging for us to even arrange a time for meeting. Actually, we have a bi-monthly, like Sharon said, we have a bi-monthly meeting, but sometimes it's quite challenging even during COVID times. I can tell you an example probably because recently Plan Indonesia has been asked to speak within the COP about the transparent mass that we developed in our community. Because as you know, we developed a transparent mass built by the deaf community in our area. So that transparent mass has been very useful to use during COVID time. So I think that's one of the example of how we should be quite adaptive to the situation in terms of COVID, because our community has the initiative to make their own transparent mass. So that has become one of the demand driven. So because of that, we put that team forward to the COP of JC COP, and that has become one of the team, to develop a transparent mass for the deaf people as well as for the normal people. So it has become an advocacy work also for us, because as you know, not many people know that transparent mass can be used for both deaf people and non-deaf people. So it has decreased the stigma among deaf people. So that's one of the examples, I think, how we should really adapt and become very aware of the current situation and then quickly make an interesting theme out of that. Thank you. I'll hand over back to Pim.
Terima kasih, Silvia. Very nice. So let's try also keeping note of the time and also looking at some of the questions which are coming in on the app. There was a question about, oh, this is all very nice, good examples, and it seems all working very well, but people also interested in what some of the challenges are in terms of making sure your COP running actively. So that question, can I ask Monique to give us some insight in that?
Yeah, indeed. Of course, this all looks very nice, and everybody always wants to learn from each other. But as you all know, when you're in a day-to-day business, you're all very busy in achieving your results on time of your own program, and you're really internal organized and looking at your to achieve your outputs and your outcomes for your year. So talking with others outside your bubble, that really you only do when you think you really get something out of it in a short time, because everybody is time bounded. So yeah, it's very challenging. So you need to you need to make sure that the right questions, that it's really demand driven, and that you get an answer when you ask something, that you really get an answer of an expert, which is in the same field, that has good ideas for you. So when you're coordinating community practice, that's really important to visualize that. How can I get people approachable? So how could people join easily? And that is by a fellow expert, and you've seen him, or you have a picture of him, and you know which expertise he's really good in and what sort of experience he has in his own country. And then you have to make sure that people meet. So we use Teams, and we have this team channel where people can chat with each other. And that's also the place that we cover all the documents of our knowledge team. So that is how we try to do it. But indeed, it's challenging to get people, that they have the urge to get outside of the bubble and are interested and take the time to learn.
Maybe I can add to that. I think how we've also done it is that everything is optional. So yes, it's demand driven. So we're asking them, we check with them time to time. We conduct surveys and ask participants' preferences for discussion themes and which tools to use. So that's practical, practitioners focused, and evidence-based. But then everything is optional and people participate if they have time. And then we make sure that all sessions are recorded, and we write up short briefing notes or learning papers that everyone can access. So it's to make the different sessions or the different tools that we have to make them as participatory and inclusive as possible, and also constructive. And I think it has also helped for us because everyone is so busy and focused on program implementation and reaching targets, is that we have set the community of practice, the hosts. It's facilitated by external consultants. So this is their focus. They interact with each of the sub-programs, of which we have 15, on a at least bi-monthly basis. And that serves then as input to the broader, wider discussions. And if it's not to your interest or you don't have time, then you leave it. And if you feel it is of your interest, then you take it up.
Yeah, can I add one thing more? What we also do in our webinars is really not trying to have a lot of presentations, because then it's not really interactive. It's so easy to, when we're all digital now in COVID time, to really let someone present something, but that's really not interactive. So what we do is ask people, bring in a case, and we split up in breakout groups and discuss about these cases. That's the most interactive way we get the info.
Thanks, Monique and Sharon. Also on the chat, some questions coming in. That's very nice. One is actually on how to deal with the different needs and aspirations of the different stakeholders you are catering for in your communities of practice. And that's a particularly relevant question when you talk about integrated water resource management. Ideally, when you talk about water resource management, you want to have the main stakeholders around the table, the agriculture sector, the water and sanitation service providers, water consumers. So very different demands and needs. Luz, in terms of making sure how your community of practice is catering for those different stakeholders coming together, how do you organize that? What are the incentives, let's say, also for them to all participate?
Yeah, so mostly I think for us at the start, it has to do with how we communicate and what is a good way to communicate. We are just starting with the COPs, but due to COVID, the Blue Deal has kind of slowed down. Usually my colleagues from the Netherlands come 3 times a year. And over the internet, communicating, it has really slowed us down. So I think for me personally, it helps me a lot with the way how we communicate with each other, and how can we therefore better learn from each other. Often I see now from the other side, my Dutch colleagues coming with deadlines or heavy plannings, which in the Ghanaian context are not really helpful. So we have to find a way of giving and taking between the Dutch and the Ghanaian partners in the way that we communicate and in the way that we create water plans, and how what kind of methods we use. So we really talk about that, and that is something I would like to learn from the COPs. And another thing to add to that is that with the Dutch water authorities, we have a lot of programs for young people who are actually working abroad for 1 or 2 years. So I'm the YEP program and we have the DB program. So I feel that the COPs can use us more to kind of fire start these COPs, because every day we deal with communication, bringing people together. So we are really ready to learn a lot. And for our colleagues in the Netherlands is a part of their job. So I think that is something that we can learn from in the future, to how to use the people that are actually stationed in the country, because they are willing to learn. And yes.
Thanks. And I think it also helps, something I think we heard from Sharon earlier, that you have like a common objective or a common question you want to answer with your community of practice. So that helps also to rally behind the different stakeholders in these communities of practice. We are slowly getting to the end of the panel session. And I think it's a really important question to wind up with, is of course the $1 million question on sustainability. So it's very nice that these communities of practice are being organized in a program context, but how do we sustain that type of learning? How do we sustain organizations and people coming together to learn from each other once these programs are finished and we are done? So perhaps Silvia, could you shed some light on that?
Yes, thank you, Pim. I think there is indeed still a big homework for all of us among the COPs. But I think the key is personal networking is, of course, after the project ends, we hopefully still keep in contact with each other, especially if we still work within WASH. And internally, also within PLAN or within our stakeholders in Indonesia, we still have a WhatsApp group and also many other venues of sharing that I think hopefully will still going. But I think also what is the key is for us to have a sort of a data bank or a way that we can store all of our knowledge and learnings within WASH SDG, for example, for us, and within other funding from the GIS. So I think that is also necessary. So whenever in the future there is another project, the new project can access that file and then learn from all the K&L that has been collected within the past project. I think that's one of the key. Thank you, Pim.
Great, Silvia. Anyone else who wants to say a few words on plans to sustain the learning beyond, let's say, the program period?
Yeah, maybe I can add as well. Okay. Oh, Saituni, it's up to you. I go first.
Yes, thank you. I can, sorry, let me add something. What I can say is like for us, what we are opting into is documentation, because we've noted that there's been a lot of communication on social media, yes, WhatsApp and the webinar, but we are also taking a step to have whatever that, for example, getting each one of us to identify the best practices and have it documented so that I can always be in a position to refer on it. And as it was also mentioned earlier, that is also personal, that kind of relationship that you have created with that specific utility or person whom you think has been doing better in this, when it comes to this community of practice, that is implementation of these strategies. So one is we want to encourage a lot of documentation, not just sharing on WhatsApp, but also taking a step, having a record on the same and reference. And also just before the end of the project, we'll want to make sure that at least there is that a peer-to-peer learning, just getting to, for example, if we can identify this, for example, Ghana is
it seems we've lost Saituni. So let's move on. Thanks for your input. I mean, this concludes the, let's say, the panel session. In the meantime, we had quite a few questions coming back through the chat, so which is really nice. We have about 10 minutes to look at those. So let's not waste any time. And let me start with also very important questions. One was asking how you start, basically. So what are some practical key recommendations for someone to kick off a process of a community of practice? I'm just randomly choosing a panelist now, to be honest. I haven't heard Emma for a while, so let's go to Emma.
I think with our community of practice, we started with a meeting with all the different people that are actually doing the same jobs, and they got to build on their relationship already. They got to know what they are doing, the challenges they have. So I actually think it really helps that you set up an event, which can be any event.
You started out before COVID time. That was good, because then
but now you can also, of course, have an online event. But in the end, I hope we are also able to meet again, of course. But yes, I think it's really important to set up and actually get to know each other, know what we are working on, and find out that we have the same challenges everywhere, but also the same things we can learn from each other. So I should start with that part.
Yeah,
that's great. Another question which came in has to do with something Sharon mentioned, and I sort of repeated also, in terms of making sure you have a safe learning environment where everyone feels secure to, you know, raise any particular, also critical issues about the work being done, which is not altogether easy, particularly also in different cultural contexts, quite difficult. So does anyone want to reflect on that a little bit? How do you do that? How do you make sure people feel safe to air any concerns?
Maybe I can start, and then maybe Silvia from a practitioner's angle can add on. I think on the one hand, we used, of course, external consultants, so that maybe kept distance, but on the other hand, also kept gave participants the opportunity to actually speak in a safe environment. And I think because, I don't know, there are, of course, organizational relationships or relationships between organizations. And I think having those two external consultants really helped in setting the scene. Plus our external consultants are really down to earth and try to make it more like a conversation than like it is like a Q&A or so that has helped as well. And they really made an effort to get to know the teams on the ground. They had initial like bi-weekly or monthly meetings with them on other gender and social inclusion topics that are more program implementing focused. But from those discussions, everyone starts to know each other. And then during these webinars or these WhatsApp groups, it's also pretty informal. And I think that has really helped in creating that safe space. But yeah, maybe Silvia feels different, then speak now, or at least add on.
Thank you, Sharon. Silvia, you can respond if you want to keep it short, because we have 10 minutes left for the session and we need to do a good wrap up, of course. But please go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Just really short, Pim. So basically within the JC community, we always make sure we implement a do no harm approach. So of course, everyone have to feel inclusive, have to feel accommodated, and then safe to speak, and then to give examples as lessons learned. And as Sharon mentioned, it has been quite useful for us to have two consultants. So they're not only helping us assess our own work, but also compare and also share within the WASH SDG. So it has been quite useful. And hopefully within the next 2 years, before the project ends, we'll be able to do many more learnings and then share many more learnings and learn from each other and still do some fun networking, I hope. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for that.
Can I add as one small?
If you are very quick,
yeah.
Monique,
well,
go ahead.
Yeah, we started in COVID time, and when I hear this conversation, I think, yeah, for us also to make it safe, sometimes it's really necessary to see each other live, because then you know your young experts like Luz meeting senior experts and thinking, oh, I'm not quite secure in what I'm saying. When you see each other live, that really helps. So whenever the time comes that we can do that again, we will, to encourage a safe environment. Yeah.
Great, thanks. Well, a big thank you to all the panelists. You really managed to keep capturing the attention of the participants. We have still 52 people in our session, which is great. So I think at this point in time, I hand to Brecht, if I'm correct, for the remainder of the session.
Yes,
go ahead,
so up to me to wrap up, and that's not easy because a lot has been said. We started by seeing what kind of different ways the communities of practice were organized, but I think there was a lot they had in common, like MailChimp, like webinars, like WhatsApp groups and newsletters. So the means were not so very different. They seem to have a very big added value, and I think that added value is also very much not only on sharing lessons learned, but also very much on the personal level. And what I take away from this session is very much, okay, we talked about how to make it a safe environment, but we also talked about the main effectiveness of exchanging knowledge and also exchanging mistakes. It's about how safe do you feel, because you learn, you know each other, you know how to find each other when you have questions. And there's a lot to be said on the how you organize it, but this is the main thing I take with me. And there was a lot of practical stuff also on how to make it easy for people to join, how to make it easy, also how to communicate in such a way that knowledge can be readily taken off, how to make it constructive, how to make it interactive. So there's a lot of how-tos, how to make the discussions in such a way that you can easily find what you need. And also how to keep the documentation that has been shared. But the main thing, to my opinion, is the networking and to get to know each other, to know how to find each other, to know how to find the right person to answer your questions. That's what I take with me. Thank you very much. And I found it very interesting. Back to you, Pim.
Thanks, Brechtje, for the wrap up. I thought it was quite interesting as well. As I said earlier, I was quite familiar with these different programs, but it's really good for me also to learn how the different communities of practice are taking shape. And I think the relevance of it is quite clear and really contributing to the effectiveness ultimately of the programs. And also, in a way, I would say, we haven't touched on that, but I would say, let's say the partnership itself, you know, feeling community of practice as a way of feeling part of a team and with a common objective. So I think that should not be underrated, particularly in these times when it's very difficult to see each other live. Well, with those few remarks, I'm only left, let's say, with thanking the panelists again. And I also want to thank all the participants who are still with us. We'll be finishing in time, so you have time to attend some other great meetings of this virtual Stockholm Water Week. And I hope we'll, at some stage, meet again live in Stockholm and be together in Sweden itself and join the mingle and dance, as always is the case in Stockholm Water Week. So looking forward to that. Thanks again. And good luck and all the best with all your work on water sanitation and hygiene and water in general. Thanks.
Thank you, Pim.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Pim. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.